Going to focus a little bit more for a couple of presentations on the social value aspect. Measuring social value was one of the biggest challenges that we faced. The creation of the National Social Value Measurement Framework, the TOMS, was a big step forward, I think, for many of us. And I'm delighted to be sharing the stage once again after about 25 years with one of our industry's sustainability champions for all of that time. Please welcome the CEO of the Social Value Portal, Guy Battle.
Hi, everybody. Hopefully, I'm going to be another excellent example of something or other. So I'm going to put the S into ESG for you. We've heard two very eloquent presentations from Georgia and UKGBC on the environmental piece. Of course, it's all interconnected, isn't it? Destroy our environment, people get harmed. But actually, I think we also need to remember that within how we work, that the S is really important. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our business, my business, then I'm going to dive into the legislation that is also driving the S through this, talk a bit about measuring social value, and then I'm going to sort of put a challenge to the industry, if you like. So I always start with the why we are in business, and I think this also should be why you guys could think about being business. Of course, it is about profits and returning profits for shareholders, and that in a way goes without saying. For us, though, it's a lot more. So our platform, what we do is all about generating new jobs for those furthest from the job market. It's about investing into our communities with supply chain. It's about building our communities and social aspects as about protecting our environment and promoting social innovation. That's kind of why we're here, and all our business is geared up towards delivering that. So we have an online platform that helps organisations measure. Now, you might think, is another measurement solution, but actually we believe that measurement also means you manage. So manage and measurement go hand in hand. If you don't have a measurement framework to talk about the social aspects or social environmental aspects, as we've heard now, you've got no way of delivering against your science-based targets or your targets. So you need measurement and management that go together. And so our platform provides measurement, procurement, contract management, and reporting all sort of into one. It allows you to bring everything together. We work across sector, and this for me is really important. So yes, we work with public sector, which is driving a lot of our work, and I'll explain why in a moment, but we also work with private sector. The private sector have an intrinsic relationship with the public sector to deliver on the services. We put community at the centre of that. So we're trying to bridge the gap between the public and private to ensure the community has a voice heard and actually is delivering. We have a whole lot of partners we work with in procurement and with generating our strategy. And then just some of our tools, it's analytics, science-based targets, all these tools are important. But what we also do is look to where the social value is delivered. Yes, we measure the value, the number of things, but actually place is really important. And if there's one sort of, three words actually, I'd like you guys to take away today, it's not people, planet and profit, which is obviously what's important. I'd like you to take away people, place and planet. The unique thing about real estate and management is that it's always in a place. It is not virtual. It's always somewhere. And quite often we forget where those places are, and we forget our agency in those places. I'll just flash through these. So I'm going to talk a bit about the drivers, and this is really important because it is transforming the relationship between the public and private, and it's now leaking into the relationship between the private and the private sector and you guys. Sitting at the top of this is the Social Value Act, or Public Services Social Value Act 2012. It's now 10 years old, and it requires all public sector buying organisations to consider social value in their procurement decision making. More recently, central government brought in additional guidance on that, and now all of central government has to include a 10% minimum weighting on social value. So that means price might be 45%, Quality of offer might be 45%, and there's a standalone weighting for social value. Most local authorities and now many other central government departments no longer use 10%. They think it's too low. They're using 15 or 20%. The bottom line is that if you want to win work with the public sector and you do not have a social value strategy, you will struggle. Now, unless your price is 20% lower, and I know your margins are really tight, so that you're not going to find that extra 20%. So you need a social value strategy. So you need to think about how we're going to embed VS into what we do, not as an added cost item, because that's going to raise your prices, but as the way that you are doing business. Now, this is just a few of those. You can see Bristol at 20%. You can see Rotherham at 20%, Brighton and Hove are between 10 and 30%, and Manchester City Council now 30%. The other thing to note is that private sector organisations are seeing the value of social value in the public sector and now bringing it into their own decision making. So I was just talking to someone called Gemma Lynch from Sodexo just earlier, and we were talking about private sector, and she is now seeing tenders where social value is part of the decision making for those private sector engagements, and that's kind of interesting, isn't it? There is no escape now from this social value stuff. It is, I've been in the world of sustainability for 25, 30 years, and when I started out in 93, 92, it was like banging my head against a brick wall. People didn't even understand what sustainability meant. It was a brand new term. I worked with a company called Arup. You all know Arups, right? Most of you do. I had to leave Arups because they didn't believe in sustainability. So I left and set up my own business. And that's how far we've changed. You can't imagine any engineering firm or any organisation not having a sustainability strategy now. But it was the case all those years ago. In the past 5-6 years of dealing with social value, I've seen just the most rapid change. Social value has come to the top of the agenda in 5 years, where it took sustainability, 20, 30 years. So it's here to stay, and it is really changing how we go about looking at our buildings. Planning now is also beginning to think about social value. So if you go to Islington, you go to Salford, you go to Southampton or Bristol, you have to submit a social value statement as part of your planning submissions. That social value statement will take into account social value generated through construction, but also the social value generated through how that asset is managed and how the community is engaged through the ongoing sort of lifetime of the building. So, you guys are right in the centre of this. There are plenty of other drivers. We've got the climate change issue. We've got the investors. It's all out there. I want to just take you to this slide now, which just sort of places ESG and social value. We've heard about the compliance issues, and ESG ultimately, its birthplace was in compliance. Are you complying from an environmental, social, and governance perspective? It's a risk minimisation framework, and that's great because we need to minimise risk. We need to hit our target temperatures, and we need to understand the risk of not hitting those. We need to understand the risk of child labour in our supply chains. We need to understand the risk of palm oil in our supply chains. The social value conversation is the other side of that coin. It's about maximising value created. So it's a different mindset. It's the same, ultimately delivering the same outcomes, but one is about minimising harm and the other is about maximising value. So we're on that upside. So all our customers come to us and we work with them because we want to maximise value. It's about the upside. Of course, you've got to ensure risk is part of that, but actually it's all about maximising value. And many organisations are using this in terms of their communication. This is just one, Land Securities. I'm sure you all know them. This is their social value report they do on an annual basis to all of their shareholders. We help them with the numbers behind this. So we put a value on the social side of things. And this is about stakeholder engagement. It's about getting new planning. It's about keeping their investors happy. This is the movement. Now, all of this is also part of their supply chain. So their supply chain delivers part of the stuff that's here. So you're kind of in the mix, whether you like it or not. Let's just talk a little bit about measuring social value because it's a really important part of this. We've developed a framework that's now become a UK-wide framework. We did it with the National Social Value Task Force that we set up now in 2016, so it's 5 years ago. And that framework's chaired by the Local Government Association, made up of about 50, 60 different organisations across the sectors, public and private, and it kind of, it's the guardian of the social value framework, the National Social Value Framework. And it makes sense to have a single framework because it allows you to have a consistent methodology. Whatever contract you're in, you can use this framework to measure the social value being delivered. And it's used by public sector in all of their procurements, certainly when they're working with us. We do round about 2,000, 3,000 procurements a year where this is embedded in the portal. And some of you, I'm sure you have come across it in some form or other. But it's made up of a series of themes, outcomes and measures, and hence it's called the National TOMS as a sort of shorthand. Just to show how it works, it's broadly based around, as I mentioned, themes, outcomes and measures, and it has a value. So what's important about the framework is based on sort of non-financial data, but we put a pound value to the contribution to society. 5 themes, jobs, growth, social, environment, innovation, and that's kind of just a way of categorizing these. You can shift the themes around if you want. Every theme has 2 or 3 outcomes. This is just some examples, like under jobs, more opportunities for disadvantaged people; under social, reducing inequalities; under environment, carbon emissions are reduced. We then want to measure it, so we actually need to have a measure. This is a unit that's measurable. I'm an engineer, so I need to measure stuff, and I need to be able to prove that it's been measured. These aren't sort of whiffle-waffle sort of KPIs that take you in the right direction. These are hard numbers, because then we want to put a value to it. So we have a unit and a value. These values come from central government, and they reflect the fiscal and economic saving to society of taking these actions and managing social value. So the total social value of any contract, of any building, any asset, any activity, any corporate work can be measured as the sum of the measures times the values. And you just need to generate your own social value measurement framework, and you can then think about how you measure and deliver that. Of course, every sector is slightly different. So the national framework was originally designed for local authorities. We've adapted that for central government. Of course, local authorities buy lots and lots of different things. They don't buy many buildings. They do buy FM services, but they also buy waste services. They buy social healthcare services. They buy all sorts of things. So the framework is necessarily generic. We've then developed a framework standalone for the construction industry, because we need to take into account things like embodied carbon, the circular economy, those sorts of things. And then we have just recently, well, it's now some months old, with IWFM, developed the FM plugin, it's called. So we take the national TOMS and we've tailored it for the facilities management industry. So you can download this free of charge from our website, and you can start using it. You can also find it on the IWFM website. So it allows you to put a value to what you're doing as an organisation. So that's kind of where we're at. I just want to sort of land it now in your futures. I'm going to sort of put a challenge out there, really. I don't think you guys get it yet. I just don't. I think you get the environmental stuff, just about. People like Georgia, bang the drum to get you to do it, which is great. But you haven't really grasped the opportunity around social. Some of you do. But I kind of think a lot of you are stuck in this old view of workplace and facilities management. And forgive me for my gross generalization, because I'm sure everyone in this room will say, Guy, I don't agree with you. But I work with a lot of colleagues in your industry. I know that this is the case. And the traditional view of the FM is, how do we ensure we're at temperature? How do we ensure we haven't got too many complaints about, the air movement in the space? How do we ensure, you might be collecting rent as well, how do we ensure that, all the external services are slip-proof and not people are going to fall over? What you're forgetting is that your role actually is not, yes, it's about all that stuff, but actually it's so much more. It's about how your occupier in your building and how you and your team engage with the community to ensure that development has agency and contributes to the place. So, as I mentioned, the thing about FM World is that it's about people, place, and planet. So it's about all the people in the building and you're working with. It's about the place the building's in, and that's what makes our industry absolutely unique. Any other industry, it could be all over the place, it does not necessarily locate it. And of course, planet, we need to understand that we've got a global impact. So I don't think it's any longer sufficient for workplace and facilities managers to be good only at sort of keeping the temperature up to the building up to temperature. They must look at how to actively promote community engagement so that the occupier and the community can flourish. That's what makes a good asset. This will ultimately lead to a more effective business and a better performing asset. So you need to make those links. And this is the life cycle that we're all involved in: community consultation, planning, construction, property management, occupation. Your bit is that end bit, right? That's where you generally sit. You might be involved in some pre-management, pre-decision strategy around during the construction. But generally speaking, you're that piece. I just wanted to show you just how important that piece is in the equation. So when you look at the total social value of an asset over 20 odd years, then only 10% is delivered through how that building's constructed, possibly 15%, but it's that sort of order, right? Through how that property is managed, it could be as much as 15%, because you're managing it through local supply chain, you're spending money every single year of those 20 years, albeit you spend a relatively little amount each year. Of course, over 20 years, rather like an energy bill, it builds up. And then the occupier has that largest percentage. So you've got, 70-odd percent, 75, that should say 75 for those who are looking closely at those numbers. So 75%. So that's the kind of the pie. Now you might say, well, look, we're just 15%. And I say, no, you're not, because you are the jam that sits between the occupier and the community. You probably have quarterly meetings with them on sustainability if you are doing anything around sustainability, and that's the right thing to do. And you probably talk about green leases and investment to green equipment, energy efficient equipment, which is really important. What you should be talking about is a community engagement. How do you ensure, how do you help that occupier engage more fully with its communities? How do you, through your supply chain, engage with communities? Because ultimately that makes sense. It makes sense for the investor in the building, because if the community is flourishing, land prices go up. It's called gentrification. Probably don't want that in some cases, but the asset value goes up. You are following your fiduciary duty to your investor. And that's really important. If you invest into the community, then there's more likely that an organisation can find the right staff in that community, because people want to move there. They're more likely to actually go there. So, this is a major role that you've got to play, and yet you kind of don't recognise it, I don't think, yet. So what can you do? It depends whether you're an in-house team, an outsourced team, or you're involved directly with the occupiers. So just as a couple of things. So if you're an in-house team, you could think about local employment, apprenticeships, obviously invest into energy efficiency. You could offer old equipment to charities. What are you doing about engaging with local charities? If you're an outsourced FM team, obviously embed social value into all your procurement. If you are managing the suppliers, then for goodness sakes, use local organisations to do your maintenance, do your employ a social enterprise or a charity to do the gardens or the rooftops. I mean, there is no excuse not to do that sort of thing. It will challenge you, because I know a lot of FM organisers, outsourcers, have centralised procurement. This moves away or challenges that model. Centralised procurement came about because you're looking for the lowest cost and greatest efficiencies. But the trouble is, it does not usually deliver value for communities, because value for communities is delivered when you're employing local organisations and local charities. You're putting money back into the community, you're putting skills back in the community, and quite frankly, centralised FM tends not to focus on that unless you rethink about that model, which you could do. And if you're an occupier, then you can get into all sorts of things plainly. So we look at the 4 stages of maximising social value, and this is, I kind of think, really important. Needs, place-based strategy, targets, monitor, improve. So that's kind of the process you're trying to do. I just want to focus briefly on the needs. The greatest value is delivered where the greatest need is. Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? So you need to understand the needs of the community. Don't just have a CSR corporate responsibility program and do to the community, you want to do with the community. That is when the community is going to really get benefit out of it. So think about, how do you go out to community and ask what they want? How do you find out where the most deprived areas are in the community? Are you using indices of multiple deprivation to understand what's happening in that community where you're at? Do you really understand the need in that community? Is it about jobs? Is it about old people? Is it about education? Is it about young people? Is it about crime? If you don't know these things, then you're not going to identify the greatest opportunity. So just a couple of organisations we're working with, in fact one principal, Legal & General. This is Mark Tyson, Head of Occupier Engagement, and we work with them in their FM contract, so private sector organisation, Legal & General, embedding social value, 10% weighting into how they selected their provider. The provider was BNP Paribas on this particular project, and they included a social value strategy, and they won it because of social value. Prices were the same, but they won it because of social value. In particular, 245 Hammersmith Road, and they're doing the most amazing things down there. Really thinking carefully about how to use the external spaces, how to use the internal spaces, how to use local supply chains, how to engage with the local authorities in delivering more social value. So these are things they're bringing to it. So I know it can be done. I know you have to be imaginative, and I know you have to rethink how you go about your work. So just my final slide, really, just kind of bringing this all together. So owners and investors are becoming increasingly interested in this broader societal impact of their assets. You're not going to escape from it. It's in local authorities already in terms of procurement. It will move into private sector procurement, so you need to have a social value policy. You need to understand how you're going to win work, not based on price and quality of your service alone, but also on the social contribution. You need to understand that you're on the front line of that demand, and you need to think about how you're going to embed social value, not as an add-on, but in your day-to-day operations. How do you ensure local businesses are engaged in the management of that building? How do you ensure local people are employed? How do you ensure that the occupier is also using you as a bridge into the community? They don't always have time. They will always have some form of CR strategy, corporate responsibility strategy, but can you get into that and help unlock a lot more value? So I think overall, you guys need to think about extending your scope, reimagining that scope. We are, I think, at a point of transition, transformation, sort of revolution. I don't know, call it a quiet revolution. I like to think that I'm, helping with that revolution. But I do think it's happening. And I think if you don't jump on that bandwagon, you are going to miss out, and you will not win the work and be part of the broader contribution to rebuilding our societies going forward. Thank you very much.